I fear no dog.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the mid-2021 New Meta Cerberus Guide. My name is Tryhard Casual, and I'm going to be the idiot that tries to make this boss as simple as possible to understand. Despite what you may have heard or seen on this boss, Cerberus isn't that difficult, especially compared to other high-end bosses. I know this sheet seems pretty intimidating, but I'm going to break it down so even a Redditor can understand it. Before we begin, I just want to lightly mention that I have a whole playlist of boss guides to check out, if you ended up liking this one. And thank you for all the support lately because the channel's just been doing awesome, and I've been really happy because of it. Love you guys. So, I'm going to throw down some timestamps, and we're going to start digging into this guide. As I usually do in these guides, I want to start off by going over some requirements and recommendations. I know the base 90s for combat stats is a little bit on the higher side, but remember that this list is going to get easier the faster you can kill Cerberus. Of course you can get kills at lower levels if you feel confident for it though, I'm not going to stop you. 91 Slayer is the only technical requirement to start getting some kills, and of course you can boost that with a Wild Pie to start even sooner if you so wanted. Cerberus also has a mechanic that drains prayer, so the more you have, the better. On top of that, having your agility at least at level 70 is highly recommended to make actually getting to Cerberus super easy, which I think we can nicely transition into now. Cerberus is going to be located inside the Taverley dungeon. You can take a house portal redirect to the Taverley portal, but a lot of people just like to use a simple Falador teleport and then run over there since there's a bank along the way. Once you're inside the dungeon, you have two different options for agility shortcuts to take, and then you can make your way down to the final level of the dungeon. Once inside, you'll have 3 hallways to pick between, each leading you to a different Cerberus room. You can actually get teleports that take you directly down to that point, but they're non-tradable and you have to get them from Cerberus. When it comes to gear, you're actually going to have a lot of different options. Melee is the more standard approach to Cerb, but range is still a competitive option. Magic might actually now be viable with the Arceuus Spells, but I'm going to put all of them into their own section later in the video. I'll start by throwing down what I ended up using for the majority of my kills and talk about melee. Cerberus, along with all Hellhounds, were recently reclassified as demons. Because of this, Arclight is now basically going to be the best weapon to bring unless you have a Scythe or a T-Bow. I'll throw down some cheaper options next to what I ended up bringing, but I mean it's all pretty straightforward, there's nothing crazy there. When it comes to spec weapons, Dragon Claws are considered to be more useful if you're not using a Scythe. If you are using a Scythe, then a Bandos Godsword would be better. I mean, I personally just took a Bandos Godsword for my task because it's cheap, and it was still a great pick even without a Scythe. You might have heard that a Spectral Spirit Shield is something you'll want to have on this fight. The passive effect on it is very useful since you lose massive amounts of prayer points during the fight. I'll talk on it more when we actually get to the mechanics of the fight. I just want to say that if you can afford it, it's definitely worth bringing. It's also better to keep it in your inventory and then just swap into it when you need it. You don't want to camp it the entire time because it's not as efficient. Of course, we still have our ranged equipment to talk about. Even with the nerfs to the blowpipe, it's still a decent pick for Cerberus. I actually ran a lot of calculations on the DPS sheet, and my findings are thus. The best ranged DPS you can get is with the Twisted Bow. The melee setup I showed with Arclight is only very slightly behind it, so melee is definitely the better pick overall. I checked out the new Bofa, and its DPS is only slightly ahead of the blowpipe, but it's going to cost a lot more with the charges for the weapon and for parts of the armor, so in my opinion, it isn't worth the slight DPS increase. I then checked the Armadyl crossbow setup, and it's still worse on DPS while also being way more expensive. So when it comes to range, I'm going to say a Twisted Bow or a Blowpipe are your only realistic options. Regardless of what you want to do, I'll have the Cerberus strategy wiki linked down below if you want to look further into your gear choices and different substitutions. When it comes to your inventory, if you're using melee, then this is what I'm going to suggest. The basic theme is that the more comfortable you are with the fight, the less food you have to take. Prayer potions are the main limiter when it comes to how long you can stay per trip. The range setups are basically going to be the same, except you either bring a Bastion potion or a range pot with a super defense. And if you brought a Spectral Spirit Shield, you can bring rune knives to keep attacking the boss when you have to equip it. Now what I just went over with gear and inventory is what I consider to be the base version for Cerberus trips. There's a few alternative methods and strategies you can employ here that call for different gear picks and inventory. I just feel like it makes more sense to go over them after you understand how the fight works normally. Right now I think it's best we just start talking about how to actually kill this mean old dog.
Bitch, I'm a dog.
Alright, now that your drip is on point and your inventory is straight bussin', we can walk down to Cerb and take her out old Yeller style. Let's start with melee. Before the fight starts, you should have your quick prayers set to Piety and Protect from Magic. If you brought a BGS, the beginning is the best time to use it, but if you have Dragon Claws or any damaging spec weapon, it's better to use it when Cerb drops below 200 health. Typically one spec, hit or miss, is the policy per kill. I like to run under Cerberus and spec as soon as she becomes attackable. Then I'll immediately swap back into Arclight and prepare for her first mechanic. At the beginning of every fight, Cerberus will always first hit with a combo attack. In rapid succession, she'll hit with magic, range, and melee. These can actually all be prayed against as long as you're fast with your changes. The best way to time your prayer swaps is to look at the orbs she shoots out. Because of your quick prayers, you'll always be protected from the first orb since it's magic. But, as soon as you see that first orb come out, you want to swap onto pray range. And the moment you see the second orb, you swap to pray melee. I'll play it again at a slower speed. It's really as simple as click on the next prayer as soon as you see an orb come out. After she hits you with melee, you'll want to go back to sitting on Protect from Magic. The second mechanic you'll have to watch out for are the Ghosts. After Cerberus drops below 400 hit points, she'll start adding Ghosts into her rotation of attacks. She'll telegraph this move by yelling, "Ow!" A range, melee, and magic ghost will start to float towards the skull by the north of the room. Melee is red, range is green, and magic is blue. The ghosts will come out in a random order every time, so you need to pay attention and pray against them in the correct order, from left to right. Every time a ghost attacks you, with the correct prayer on or not, you're gonna lose 30 prayer points. This is why you want the Spectral Spirit Shield. If you brought one with you, you'll want to swap onto it when the ghosts come out, and you'll only lose 15 prayer points per ghost instead of 30. Also, if the ghosts do hit you without the correct prayer on, you'll be damaged for 30 hit points. The timing to switch between your prayers isn't as tight as it is with Cerberus' combo attack, but you still want to be quick when changing between them. What I like to do is change my prayer to the next one as soon as I see the animation from each ghost. While the ghosts do drain up to 30 prayer points per shot, you don't need to have 90 prayer to survive. For example, if you're currently at 65 prayer, the first 2 ghosts will drain you down to 5. The last ghost will then drain you down to 0 and you'll take no damage. You don't have to be above 30. You can see how it's actually beneficial to stay just above the 2 ghost threshold. In that example, you'll only lose a total of 65 prayer instead of 90, while still remaining completely protected from damage. Of course, after that last ghost, your prayer is going to be drained to 0, so you'll have to sip a prayer dose right away and get your quick prayers back up and rolling. The third and final mechanic to watch out for are lava pools. Cerberus will only start using this attack after she drops below 200 hit points. She'll telegraph this with a very scary grrr and shoot out 3 lava spots you'll want to avoid. One pool will always fly to your current location and you'll most likely take a hit unless you're extra diligent. Regardless, you always want to move 2 squares away from the impact point or you'll continue taking rapid damage. Cerb is best known for throwing out these right as ghosts are also coming out, so it can get a little bit hectic once she's below 200 hit points. So those are actually the only mechanics to the fight, which means it's time to address the elephant in the room, this nifty little attack sheet. It can look a little intimidating, but it's really not as bad as it seems. I would suggest when you're first learning Cerb, you really do want to count her attacks and follow the sheet closely. After you get familiar with the fight, you won't need the sheet at all, and you're not going to need to count either. I mean, I like to think of it more as a logic puzzle than anything else. Certain attacks won't happen if Cerb isn't under a certain HP threshold, and you're going to get into a rhythm of, oh, I'm seeing Ghost before the second combo attack, so I must be on hit 7. And I know that a combo attack is going to come soon after. And I know that combo attacks start with a magic hit, so any magic attacks I see right now are a little bit sus for a combo, so I'll get my prayer changes ready just in case. I mean, it's hard to explain, but after you diligently count attacks and use this sheet for a while, you'll know what I'm talking about. You're also going to notice that if your DPS is on the very high side, that lava attacks can start coming out before attack 20, so accounts with higher stats and good gear, best pay attention to this. I don't want to forget about using range here though. Essentially, the fight is almost completely identical. The advantage of using range is that you no longer have to worry about tanking melee hits, and it's much easier to dodge lava pools that get thrown under your feet. You'll still want to camp protect for magic most of the fight. You just have to remember that the melee hit in the combo attack will still hit you at range. That's actually all there is when it comes to the fight though. You're now certified to start getting some basic kills. I personally think using one of the alternative methods I'm going to talk about is my preferred way of completing a task because it allows you to get many more trips per kill. Ghost skipping is the first thing I wanted to mention. This method is much slower compared to the regular method, but you save a lot of money on supplies, specifically prayer potions. Looking at the attack sheet, you'll notice that after attack 14, Cerberus will not use another ghost for another 14 attacks. This creates an opportunity for us. The idea is to get Cerb as close to 400 hit points as possible, but then just sit and wait with the Din's Bulwark, or other tank item, until after her 14th attack. At that point, you're free to just lay into her without worrying about ghosts and having your prayer drained. It would be rather annoying to sit there and count 14 attacks every kill, so what people like to do is start a timer at the beginning of the fight. Once your timer passes 56 seconds, you should be good to attack and complete your kill as usual. As I said, the downside is that this method takes a lot longer, and it's also harder to keep track of her combo attacks, so you're most likely going to be tanking them. But your inventory is going to be much lighter on prayer potions so you can stock up on food. I'm still going to recommend you bring a Spectral Spirit Shield in case you mess up and drop Cerb below 400 hit points, and the ghosts come out anyway. Using a Blood Fury amulet is actually going to be my preferred method for killing Cerb. It is quite expensive, but you still end up with a decent GP an hour provided you eventually get a Primordial Crystal. For those of you that don't know, a Blood Fury is just an amulet of fury that also occasionally heals you for part of the melee damage you deal. You know, think Guthans, but in a necklace. This allows you to load up on prayer potions and really extend your trips as far as they can go. There's also a cheaper version of this method by way of suicide. Before the Blood Fury was in the game, players would load up a full looting bag and inventory just with food and prayer potions and skull themselves over in Edgeville. You would then run into Cerberus' room and let her kill you. After you respawn, you can then gear up as normal, run back in, and you'll have a huge pile of supplies to keep you rolling down in the deep. You can use whatever method you'd like or what sounds the best. I just prefer using melee with a Blood Fury because it's the least effort and it maximizes how long I can stay down there in one trip, even if it is more on the expensive side. I'm sure this is the part of the video a lot of people were curious about. Is the Arceuus Spellbook actually worth using here? The short answer is yes, a lot of spells are good here, but they do run more on the expensive side. Let's talk about them one by one so you can determine which ones you might want to use. Word of Arceuus reduces the damage you take from demons by 10%, which is a nice buff, but I feel is ultimately unnecessary if you're using a Blood Fury or the suicide method since prayer is more of the limiting factor and not food. I think for first timers this is definitely more worth it than it would be for someone that's comfortable with the fight. Resurrecting a Thrall definitely puts out some damage in your kills and is a lot of fun to use. It costs 6 prayer points every time you want to cast one though, which is a hard sell for me since Cerberus melts your prayer normally anyway. I mean, it's hard to say, you know, this spell is very new, but I think people that really want to max out their kills per hour are going to find some use from this. For the average player that doesn't want to try hard, I think you'll be alright leaving this one in the bank. I want to emphasize that this one is more of a personal opinion, and it's really up to you if you want to spend an extra 2k gold and 6 prayer points per kill, on top of taking up 4 additional inventory slots for the runes in the book. Death's Charge on the other hand is something that I think everyone should use. Cerb kills come relatively quick, and getting 15% spec energy back every kill adds up a lot actually and helps push out a lot of damage in the long run, especially if you're using Dragon Claws. We also have Demonic Offering. Since Cerb is now a demon, you end up getting Infernal Ashes each kill. Using Demonic Offering when you have 3 ashes in your inventory will restore a total of 6 prayer points for 458 gold. Of course, just taking more prayer potions instead of the runes for this spell will give more prayer restore overall, but being able to restore 6 prayer points whenever you want to in the fight can be beneficial. For example, if you're just below a ghost threshold for prayer drain, instead of wasting a whole sip of prayer potion, you can instead use demonic offering and then only have the 6 prayer drained instead. I mean, on top of that, it gives you a fair amount of prayer experience too. I really think this one comes down to personal preference because you also have the option to just save the Infernal Ashes and loot and sell them, or you can use an Ash Sanctifier to get passive prayer experience with them instead. If you did bring every single spell here, your inventory would look something like this. I mean, like I said, I really think this is more about picking and choosing what you personally want to take with you. They are, for sure, all useful at Cerberus. The real question is just how much you're willing to spend on additional spells to speed up kills. There are actually 2 more spells that are of some interest here. Mark of Darkness and Dark Demon Bane weren't really considered useful at the time of them being implemented. They just weren't strong enough to get past high magic defense. Just this past week, they did receive a pretty big buff though. Unfortunately, this video is pretty far along in production and I haven't been able to test them out personally. I've been trying, but I can't seem to get a Hellhound task, and this video is already overdue. It's very possible that magic is now a viable option to use on Cerb with these spells. I regret that I can't be the one to tell you if it is or isn't though. All I know is that it shows a lot of potential. If Demon Bane did output enough damage, I would imagine your setup would look something like this. I'm sure you guys looked up on the wiki what Cerb's drops already are. I mean, that's what everyone likes to do. They like to look up the loot. I want to say that your GP an hour is really tied to getting a Primordial Crystal. Thankfully, it's only a 1 in 128 to get any of the crystals, so chances are it won't take that long to get to the potential GP an hour. That is finally going to do it on this one though, guys. There was a lot to go over, but I think we hammered it out alright. If anything changes with what I went over, I'll be sure to update it down below as I normally do. And if you ended up finding this video useful, a like on it would really go a long way to help me out, and I would appreciate it. Of course, if you guys have any questions about Cerberus, or RuneScape in general, feel free to ask me. I hope you all have a great rest of your day, and I'll see you in the next one.